For a long time, historians assumed civilizations usually end the same way: war, famine, disease, invasion. Something breaks and everything falls apart. But this case doesn't fit that pattern. At its peak, this society was large, organized, and highly capable. It had dozens of cities, and they weren't built at random. They were planned, connected, and sustained by long-distance trade. Millions of people relied on the system continuing to work. And then, over what seems like a relatively short span of time, the cities began to empty. They weren't burned. They weren't conquered. They weren't invaded. People simply left. There's no final battle described anywhere. No disaster recorded in stone or clay. No clear reason left behind. Even now, thousands of years later, we still don't really know what happened. This is the story of a civilization that didn't collapse in the usual sense. It simply vanished. This wasn't a small or isolated culture. It wasn't struggling at the edge of survival. It spread across a region larger than most ancient empires, with hundreds of settlements and dozens of major cities, all connected by the same ideas. Across this enormous area, people used the same measurements, the same brick sizes, and the same construction rules. That level of coordination is rare, even by modern standards. Today, we call this lost world the Indus Valley Civilization. And despite decades of excavation and research, historians still don't agree on why its cities were abandoned. What makes the mystery harder to dismiss is how functional everything appears to have been. The cities followed grid layouts. Streets were straight and organized. Drainage systems ran beneath houses instead of through them. Some homes even had indoor bathrooms connected to covered sewers, a level of sanitation that wouldn't become common again. For thousands of years, in many parts of the world, this doesn't look like a society falling apart. It looks like one that was working. When archaeologists first began uncovering these cities, they expected to find signs of violence, burned layers in the soil, collapsed defenses, or mass graves. But those signs never appeared. There's no widespread destruction, no evidence of a final war, no clear moment where everything suddenly goes wrong. Instead, the evidence points to something slower and much harder to explain. Over time, populations shrink. Public buildings stop being repaired. Major urban centers lose their importance. Trade networks weaken. Standards that once held everything together begin to fade. And over generations, people move away from the cities their ancestors built. Not in panic, not as refugees. They leave deliberately and quietly. One of the biggest problems historians face is silence. The Indus people left behind writing, but no one has been able to read it. The script exists, carved and stamped across artifacts, yet it remains undeciphered. So there is no final account, no warning, no explanation written down. When the cities go quiet, the evidence does too. One of the most common explanations involves climate. Geological data suggests monsoon patterns in the region weakened over time. Rainfall became less reliable, and farming would have been harder to sustain. At first glance, this explanation seems reasonable. But when climate data is compared with archaeological timelines, problems begin to appear. The climate changes were gradual, stretching over centuries. Some of the largest Indus cities, however, decline within just a few generations. Even more telling, nearby societies experienced similar environmental stress and managed to adapt. They changed crops, adjusted irrigation, and reorganized their systems. The Indus cities did not adapt. They were abandoned. In several cases, cities appear to have been left before the most severe climate effects show up in the record. Climate explains pressure, but it doesn't fully explain why the cities were never rebuilt. Another theory focuses on rivers. Some rivers that once supported Indus cities may have shifted course or slowly dried up. For an agricultural society, losing reliable water would have been serious. But when researchers tracked population movement, the pattern didn't line up. When rivers move, people usually move with them. Indus populations did not. Many left fertile river regions entirely. Worse for this theory, some cities were abandoned while nearby rivers were still flowing, while others remained occupied long after rivers declined. There's no consistent sequence. If rivers were the cause, abandonment should follow water. It doesn't. Some historians argue there was no collapse at all, just a gradual shift away from cities, a peaceful decentralization of society. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, but it raises another problem. Cities exist because they solve problems: trade, coordination, governance, protection. The Indus cities solved those problems extremely well. If decentralization was intentional, new urban centers should appear elsewhere. They don't. If the transition was peaceful, core systems should evolve. They don't. Standardized weights disappear. Writing vanishes. Urban planning stops. Nothing replaces them. They're simply gone. A gentle transition doesn't erase the foundations of an advanced civilization. Something interrupted it. Each explanation works in isolation, but when tested against the full body of evidence, each one fails in a different way. Climate moves too slowly. River patterns don't match human movement. Peaceful decline explains absence, but not disappearance. Together, they describe pressure. None of them explain the ending. Civilizations usually leave scars: burned cities, ruins of conquest, clear signs of collapse. The Indus Valley leaves something worse: uncertainty. A civilization capable of building for millions simply stops and never explains why. Whatever caused the cities to empty, it left no warning, no record, and no clear trace. Only cities built for millions, abandoned by everyone, and a question history still can't answer. Share your theory in the comments. Subscribe for more mysteries.